Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, wherever you happen to be watching from at the moment. Yvonne and I are back. We're doing the second episode of maybe the first series of the Founders Series. We'll see how things go. So let's just introduce Yvonne. There we are. Yvonne, would you say hi? Say hello to people?
Yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, great to be back, and really enjoying my conversations with Lee. So yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. And for those that care, there's me, Lee Norris. I'm also one of the directors of Change Innovators, and I work really closely with Yvonne and our global team. Start kind of where we left off, but before we dive into the detail, we were talking about New World Leadership, Yvonne, and New World Leadership isn't anything, because sometimes it's, people perceive it as the program that we run, but it's a philosophy, right? And maybe we could start there with the philosophy of New World Leadership. What does that bring up for you?
I think it evolved because we've been doing it so long. It's really evolved over the last 25 years, particularly the last 20. But I think at the core of it was I started in my house and, had a tiny little office, and then we sort of grew into, big office spaces and training rooms. And it was interesting in the early days because we ended up getting some contracts with youth at risk. So I'm going to digress us a little bit just to share, because obviously as the founder, I have stories that no one else on the team has. And one of the first contracts that I got was working with youth at risk. So these were youth, they had to be under the age of 30. And they were individuals who were, they'd been unemployed, weren't eligible for any kind of assistance because they hadn't worked and contributed. And this is a system in Canada that unless you work and contribute, it's really hard to get social assistance. You can get social assistance for other reasons, but and so these were youth that kind of fell between the cracks. So they didn't really, weren't able to get any support. And so we ran this program, and it was really cool because it was sort of 6 months long. And we would bring in a group of 15 to 20 young people, and we would really start to work with them. And the essence of it was that you were supposed to teach them how to do, resumes and interview skills and how to look for a job and how to present yourself. It was all that was the content of this program. And as long as they attended the program and attended all the training, they were given assistance. And so they were given assistance for quite a long time so that they could actually reestablish themselves, get back on their feet and get a job. And it's a very good program. And I have to say, it's so interesting because in the early days, it really started there. I mean, we were working with corporate clients, but watching these young people and realizing that what we really didn't want to do, teaching them how to write a resume was the easy part. That was the easy part, right? Teaching them how to write a cover letter and how to interview. But it was really about giving them a chance to discover who they were. It was really about giving them a chance to explore themselves and to explore, sort of how did they end up where they were? We had some people in the program that were homeless. They were living on park benches and in parks. And just giving them a safe space. So every morning they had to be there, and they would come at 8:00 in the morning, and there'd be hot coffee and there'd be food and there'd be, and then we'd start to have these deep conversations. And through that process, it's a very humbling, like I can't describe really how humbling that experience was for me, as well as for Michael. Was very involved in the early days, one of our Canadian president, in the early days with the program. And because they were so vulnerable, I don't know how to describe it. They were so vulnerable. And I'd always lived, I'd always had a roof over my head. I'd never had to worry about, how to feed myself or, having shelter. But these were kids who'd come from very violent backgrounds in some cases, alcohol abuse, physical abuse, so, mental abuse. And it was a really humbling experience. But what happened was the deep connections we made with these youth over a period of sort of 6 months was you saw them. we got to see them. And so people that were in their toughest place, moving towards actually finding themselves and getting back on their feet, but actually getting to see them. And I think those kids, and they weren't kids, they were young adults, but they really felt seen and heard. So for me, that was one of the catalysts that led into the addition of New World Leadership. So that I kept sort of expanding what we were doing, and and we kept. I'm just going to adjust my volume here and see if we can. So we ended up the philosophy. When we think in terms of the philosophy, I think it's really hard to nail it down to one thing other than to say that it has really grown and expanded over the years. And that Youth at Risk program was one of the catalysts that had me start to dig deeper about what were some of the things that we needed to bring into the program to make it as dynamic. And we're talking 20 years ago, so a lot of companies weren't doing this, back then. And it really became, in my mind, about a journey of self-exploration, about really personal development, because for me, it was always that philosophy of, well, how can you ask someone to do something that you're not prepared to do yourself? How are you, you can't really be authentic and lead people if you don't actually know who you are. So the philosophy kind of developed over that, in particularly really got ingrained in the first sort of 5 to 8 years. Now it's sort of, and I always kind of knew that the end result was, or the end goal was always, how do we create organizations, corporations, companies that are grounded in love and not in fear? And, it's as simple as that. How do we help companies create a real foundation that is grounded in love and not in fear? And if we can do that, and that's a big statement, because that's not easy to do, because, for over 150 years since the Industrial Revolution, and it's all about productivity and KPIs and ROI, and I understand that. We don't ever want to lose that. That's part of the corporate world. And capitalism for good is really important, right? I mean, we can do a lot when we are successful financially. We're allowed to spread our reach and increase our scope. So, but I would say the initial foundational piece was that creating these, helping to assist in creating these companies that were truly grounded in love. And love doesn't mean, and this is the piece that can be very confusing for organizations who are just starting to put their foot in the water, is they think it's about giving the employees everything, and they think it's about compassion, and we have to be compassionate in every situation. And it's actually, love is not what we think it is. We've been kind of trained to think in terms of love for our children, love for our pets, love for our spouse, love for our family. But that's not what this is. This is a true human connection where we focus on what our commonalities are, not what our differences are. Because there are things that bind human beings together as a species. We are the very, very common things. We all want to belong. We all want to have family and love in our lives. We all want to have shelter and food and feel safe. We all want to be part of something bigger than myself. I want to contribute to something more meaningful than just me. That's a pretty I would say, and we do exercises like that, where we get leaders to think in terms of what are the things that bind us together versus what separates us. So the overall philosophy is very much about, and I'll come back to that Youth at Risk program, 10 years after we'd stopped running that program, and for lots of different reasons, people would stop by the office with 24 donuts, and that's what they could afford. And they would say, oh my God, you changed my life. And there's, maybe that day there's only 5 people at the office, right? And there's 24 donuts. It's like, okay, party, But it was their way of saying, oh my goodness, this changed my life. And we got that all the time. We didn't get it once in a while. And I knew we were onto something. And that filtered, and we were really developing New World leadership while that was going on. This is really early days, right? This is 23 years ago. And, but you could really see it. So what I understood was that when I could make a heart-to-heart connection with another person, when a person could feel that I truly deeply feel that it really mattered to me, that they were successful. I'm not attached to it, but if I'm going to be there, it matters to me, your success, your happiness, you're feeling grounded, you're feeling safe. And when they can feel that, it changes them fundamentally, because they see it in themselves. People see it in themselves. They see their goodness, they see their love, they see their wanting to be able to contribute to something bigger, but they've maybe lost that along the way.
When in my own way, when I've tried to explain what I think this means to people, because bringing the word love into leadership development can kind of have that type of reaction. What I say to people is, if your whole team on some feedback to you said, I really love working here, would that seem strange? Would that be something that you would want? And everyone says, well, yeah, of course that's what we would want. Yeah. Or, I really, really enjoyed, I really, really loved working with that team of people, or I really loved working on that project. They're not talking about, kind of anything romantic love or some other kind of love. What they're saying is, it's a way of being, isn't it? I mean, I know I like to bring that in, but I loved it. And when people are saying that they loved it, they loved working there, it's a sense of belonging, isn't it? It's a sense of feeling like you're in tune with yourself and in tune with the people around you and in tune with, the direction of travel, something along those lines. So
their heart fills up.
Yeah, the heart fills up.
The heart fills up, right? So that's the piece. But sometimes people turn that down so much because they're so busy on the treadmill, delivering the results, and and the thing that's interesting about the word love, and I think we should just talk about this for a minute, because I get super frustrated. I got to say, I mean, I'm known to be very controversial when it comes to some of the really famous people out there that do leadership work, and they're on every, write all the books and blah, blah, blah. And, they weren't talking about love 20 years ago. Trust me, they weren't. They watch to see what the trend is, and then they're all about it. This has been the core of who we've been. And the reason was, I saw so many people hurt at work, like really wounded at work, treated horribly, yelled at, belittled. I mean, I'm old. I've been around. I've seen it all. And, I just wanted to bring relief to that. That became my mission. My mission became to give relief to that in whatever way that I could. And so love's been at the core of it. Kindness, love, compassion, empathy, and delivering results. And here's the thing that's really interesting about delivering results linked to this, is that when people are really connected to their work, the results happen. They really do. Because when they're really connected to their work and they really care, and they really like working with their team and their line manager, they will put their hand up when they're overwhelmed and say, I need some help, because they care. They will put their hand up and say, I've made a mistake. They'll own it because they care. they will work incredibly hard and give a lot of, discretionary effort to get results because they love it, because they love the environment, they love the people, they love the work. And so we have never had anyone sort of say productivity's a problem because you've taught people how to care for themselves and how to care for each other. So it's a natural kind of result. What we do see happen sometimes is people will leave their organizations, which is really sad because they suddenly, the organization just isn't prepared to make the changes and they feel really trapped and locked in. And so let's dig a little deeper because what can happen is we can end up on this surface conversation of love, and that's not who we are, and it's not what we do. But I think what happened along the way was we kept finding pieces of the puzzle, because when that's your focus, and it's been our focus for so long, the pieces of the puzzle just sort of showed up. And it's really interesting because, of course, automatically the first thing you want to do is have really good assessment tools, right? So you want to give people a space to really understand themselves. But and we worked for companies where the assessment tool became everything, and that was the language. And, and then they would label people and they'd say, oh, you're just a red, or you're a this, or you're that. And it was, horrific, really. So we always made a real point of saying, that this is a tool, this is not the program. This is not what we do. This is just one tool in a series of tools. And so that was an early day thing. That's 23 years ago. We get the right tools, get the right assessments. And then Michael said to me, oh boy, 15, 16 years ago, he's been with us a really long time. And he said, I want to do this heart math work. I really want to do this heart math work. I want to understand the science. And 15, 18 years ago, we were really starting to see some new sciences coming out that were going to allow us to understand the physiological part of what goes on when love is part of your mantra, when you understand how to regulate emotions and all those things. So, and he kept bugging me, I got to go do this course. And it was really expensive back then. And we were really small, 18 years ago. But he just hounded me, and it was just like, yeah, we got to do it. And he came back and just, exploded with all kinds of things that were not only scientifically based, but worked really well. And so that became part of our program. And then other things came along, and that became part of our program. And then we were researching. We're always researching. We're always looking for the best books, the most recent research. I mean, this is an ongoing thing. So our program is revamped really intensely every 18 months. We make tweaks along the way in between those 18 months, but every 18 months to 2 years, no longer than 2 years, and the whole program kind of gets looked at, and pieces removed that aren't as relevant anymore, and new things brought in. And that really led to the accountability model.
Right.
That really led, and I think there's a deeper conversation about the accountability model that I think is worth at some point, we're going to want to talk about. But yeah, so long-winded answers around philosophy, but its core has always been, how do we support leaders and their organizations to be grounded in love and not in fear? And secondly, I can't expect anyone to do anything that I'm not prepared to do. I've got to work on me. I've got to work on me before I can ask anybody else to improve themselves. And that's a missing piece. That's a missing piece in most organizations. It's the reason why we have never done, we've never done leadership work around events, because it doesn't work. We don't stick people in hotel rooms for 5 days and do 5-day leadership courses. And, we just don't do it because the science stuff, number one, doesn't support that for rewiring the brain. But also it doesn't give the person the real opportunity to do the hard work, which happens over months and years. And so our whole philosophy was grounded in providing that relief and supporting those leaders, and so providing relief to the employees, but doing that through supporting the leaders.
And if I was to reflect on, my own experiences, I suppose, of being part of this now, is that there are, people can be quite cynical about neuroscience. It's like a bandwagon that everyone's jumping on. It is a new science and a new area, as is coaching. I mean, let's face it, the whole area that we're in
its infancy. Yeah.
It's in its infancy. So I think it's good to recognize that, actually, that we're actually at the forefront of something quite different, because the world has changed. Most of the people working in organizations, maybe some people would dispute this, but we're kind of knowledge workers. We need to use our high-end prefrontal cortex abilities in order to do the work and to do the things we need to do. And if I understand you correctly, Yvonne, then what you're saying is, in order to be able to activate the learning center of the brain and to really allow people to thrive and grow, the science of leadership is about enabling people to be not just, mentally, but emotionally and physically, and to some extent spiritually. And what I mean by that, when I say that, is about their values and beliefs are in alignment with who they truly are. And a lot of practice in organizations is upside down, because it's the opposite of that.
Right.
We've been taught to kind of control and use fear in some ways, and it's in simple terms, like, let me just be a little bit ambiguous with you, so that you're actually guessing all the time about what it is that I actually want, for example. Okay,
yeah. So you've said a few things that are really important. So first of all, we've always been on the cutting edge. We're not on the cutting edge now. We always have been. We've been laughed at. We've been told you don't need to do that. And that's the reason why. I'll give you an example of a conversation we would have had I did have years ago with one of our really large Canadian clients, that, we said, they want a coaching program. Teach our leaders how to be great coaches, right? And I said, well, we can do that. And there's a ton of vendors out there that can do that. We can give you the core competencies of coaching as a leader inside your organization. But I said, what happens is, because it's flavor of the month, right? It's like 1 minute it's this, and the next minute it's love, and the next minute it's coaching, and I said, but the problem is that what you're going to do is we're going to teach your leaders how to ask great questions, but if they haven't done their own work, if they don't know what's the energy that is, what is the energy that the other person is feeling, right? What is the environment in which you're having that conversation in? What preparation have they done? If they haven't done that personal work and they show up to do coaching, it's following a roadmap. Give me the 8 steps. So in our coaching as a leader program, for example, we do 4 modules just on me, which is my stuff, before we ever go into the competencies of coaching. Because, and they say to us all the time, like, we don't get it. I thought this was a coaching course. What do you, and it's like, it is. But, you can't show up and put a hat on and say, I'm a coach. The greatest coaches have done enormous personal work and are still on the journey of their personal work. They don't wear a flag t-shirt that says I'm a coach. They say I'm a work in progress, and I happen to talk to people. The best coaches, that's their approach.
Yeah.
So our philosophy has always been around that. We always take the road less traveled in almost every case, because that's what has felt right to us as a team. I think that we're probably going to get into some pretty deep conversations in the next episodes about some of those things, because some of them are really controversial that we've just said we won't do. It started off with easy things like we won't do events. We're not going to take your money and put you in a hotel room because we know it doesn't work. We've always run very different, run our programs differently. We were doing 11-month programs, 11 module programs, 12 module programs 18 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
The first version of New World Leadership was 8 modules.
Right.
That was the first version 20 years ago. First version. So, that tells you now we're at 12 modules, which we will keep it there. I don't think we'll add, unless, never say never. But, that was never, people said to me, no, I just want you to come for, I just want you to come for that. It's like the woman who called and said, can you come out and do a half-day workshop on how to deal with difficult people? I'm like, no. No. I'm not going to take your money to do something that is a waste of time.
Right.
So, I don't think I added to that, but
no, but I think, just to circle back to the story that you were telling about Michael and HeartMath. So probably many people who are watching this are probably thinking, what did they say? And was it HeartMath? Yes, that's what we're saying, HeartMath. So we incorporate HeartMath into the work that we do. Okay, we do.
Yeah.
But it kind of goes back to what you were saying, is that if you really want to understand how to lead, then understand yourself. And part of you is the connection that you have with your heart, your center, because it's like the center. If we're going to talk about love and do it seriously, when you feel things, you don't just feel them here in your brain. You feel them here, and sometimes those emotions and those feelings can be very strong, and because I I'll put it, I probably won't get this right, but sometimes people they don't want to lean into that feeling because it's strong. Okay, they go back from it. So sometimes it's preventing people from having a deeply human conversation because they haven't learned how to experience themselves and have a conversation with themselves about who they are. And if you haven't really tried that, then how is it going to be possible for you to have a deeply human conversation with another person? Maybe I haven't got that quite right, but that's why we focus a lot of attention on the heart, because it's about the connection between the brain and the heart that is key to doing some of this work, at least, right?
Yeah. Coherence is so we've worked in the realm of coherence. What you're really describing is coherence, and our ability to have our nervous system, so our brain and our nervous system and our heart coherent. So they're working in tandem, and they're working in flow, and they're working in a space that is considered well-being, right? So it's that, it's that part of the nervous system that allows us to be calm, and it allows us to access our prefrontal cortex and all of those pieces. I think it's really a shame if we come back to what you were talking about, because today's really about philosophy and about sort of approach. The challenge with the trendy stuff is there are certain things that just, are not trendy, and they're only trendy if we make them trendy, right? So, HeartMath is a piece of the puzzle. Michael was, I think, the second person in Canada to be certified in the Resilience Advantage. And so a long time ago is when they really first started doing a lot of the really in-depth training. And it was really new. Like, people were like, what are you talking about? But the science is there. Now the science is even stronger. There's way more evidence to what they were doing back then. And now there's a lot of different great breathing techniques and all kinds of strategies for people. And of course, it's really, really needed. And it's the same with understanding neuroscience, right? And positive psychology. These are all pieces of a puzzle. They're not a trend. they're a trend. When we bring them in, we make a lot of money off them, and then we throw them off to the side and grab the next trend. Then they're a trend.
Yeah.
But we've never done that, and we've never done that for a reason. And we've had people ask us, can you come in and do diversity and inclusion training? And we say no. We have people come in and say, can you do just this piece of training? And we say no. Now, there are people that do that, and that's fine, but that's not us. When we think in terms of our ethos, we think in terms of our philosophy. Our philosophy is the whole person,
Right.
and the whole person is about their ability to understand, well, why is my stomach sore today? What's that about? What's going on? What are the messages coming up to my brain? What are the messages from the brain to the stomach or the heart happening? And so understanding the whole person. And so these pieces of the puzzle are all part of that philosophy. And at the core of that philosophy is the ability to run organizations that are grounded in kindness and love, not in fear. And by the way, I just want to say this because I think it's really important. I never met a leader ever who said, yep, I rule by fear. I always want to make sure everyone's fearful of me. And, I want to intimidate them. None of this has ever been intentional. And this is why, the accidental culture is all over the place. And now people are really starting to say, wow, we do have an accidental culture here. How do we shift it? It's also accidental leadership, which is really not leadership, it's management, and we've trained people, remember, and in our program, we talk about all kinds of things, even the mirror neurons, which we know we're reflecting back what we see a lot of the time. So having people have that understanding and just asking simple questions like, what's my impact on other people? What's my impact when I walk into a room? And more importantly, when I leave, how do I leave people feeling? We've given really bad news to people over the years. We have clients who've given really bad news and done it with real kindness and really made the person feel good, even though it wasn't great news. And an ability to take a big exhale together because there's mutual relief. If you do this right, with our philosophy, we've seen it many times where people can make really tough business decisions that are critically important to the core of the business and not let people leave feeling like I'd go back there and work tomorrow because they treated me so well in a really difficult situation. And that's what we do.
Now I reckon we're probably at a good time to tease people a bit more with what's to come. So, we ended the last session, or I started asking big questions, and we said, well, hang on, let's do that next time. So we've put our toe in the water really around the practicalities of this alongside the philosophy of this. So, we've talked a little bit about some of the psychometrics, we've talked a little bit about some of the techniques around heart math and so on. And I think maybe we should just stop here and consider and leave the space for people to wonder.
And I think there's a good conversation maybe in our next chat about how the accountability model came about.
Because that does get to some of the practicalities of that.
And it's huge for people. So when people practice it, it's huge for people. So let's do that. Let's do that next time.
Okay. All right. Well, if you've tuned in live, thank you so much. We know we got a couple of comments last time, and one of them, was about, kindness, honesty with good intentions equals kindness. Somebody picked that up and said, right, I'm going to go and use that as my mantra. So thank you very much for that. If you're watching via our podcast series, then we're lovely. It's lovely to also still be with you. So we'll see you next time. And till then, take care.
Great.
Bye.
Thanks, Lee. Bye.